is what does God think about the wearing of makeup and jewelry? Not what Joe Cruz or anybody else thinks. What does God think? Does He like it? Or does He dislike it? And I say, friends, if we can find the answer to that question in the Bible, we've got the answer to the question that came in the question box, haven't we? We ought to have it. I hope we have it if we can find that out. Now, what does the Bible say? Does God give us any hints or indications here in the Bible as to what He thinks about this practice? Well, I'm going to go right through the Bible reading a number of verses tonight. And by the way, all of these verses will be in a little book that will be handed out as you leave the meeting today. And this will contain every text that I'm going to give right now, plus a lot more as well. I think about 46 texts. So if you don't get to write these down, you'll get them all as you leave. This will be given one to a family as you go out from the meeting today. But now, the first text I'd like to read is found in the first book of the Bible, Genesis chapter 35. And God said unto Jacob, Arise, go up to Bethel, and dwell there, and make there an altar unto God that appeared unto thee when thou fleddest from the face of Esau thy brother. Then Jacob said unto his household and to all that were with him, Put away the strange gods that are among you, and be clean, and change your garments. And let us arise and go up to Bethel, and I will make there an altar unto God, who answered me in the day of my distress, and was with me in the way which I went. And they gave unto Jacob all the strange gods which were in their hand, and all their earrings which were in their ears, and Jacob hid them under the oak which was by Shechem. Now this Bethel is a place where Jacob was converted. Remember that? It's where he struggled with the angel and became a new man out there. And now he's taking his family back to that sacred spot and to build an altar there to worship God and to dedicate his family at that holy place. But before he went up there to take his family, they laid aside these things, the ornaments, and in fact they buried them there, it says. They got rid of the strange gods which were in their hand and the earrings which are in their ears. And then they went up to the altar of God after burying those things there and going to the altar. Now I gather, friends, that they had a good reason for this. We're going to find as we go on reading in the Bible, both Old and New Testament, that these things were marks of the heathen people, and that God did not approve of these things. All right, now this is what you're going to notice as we go along. When they went up to dedicate their lives, they laid aside those things, buried them, and then went up to the altar of God. You come on to the next chapter of the Bible in Exodus, and chapter 33. Exodus 33. Here the Israelites are headed toward the promised land. Verse 1, the Lord said to Moses, Depart and go up hence. Verse 2, And I will send an angel before thee, and I will drive out the Canaanite, the Amorite, the Hittite, the Perizzite, the Hivite, and the Jebusite, unto a land flowing with milk and honey. For I will not go up in the midst of thee, for thou art a stiff-necked people, lest I consume thee in the way. And when the people heard these evil tidings, they mourned, and no man did put on him his ornaments. For the Lord had said unto Moses, Say unto the children of Israel, Ye are a stiff-necked people. I will come up into the midst of thee in a moment and consume thee. Therefore now put off thy ornaments from thee, that I may know what to do unto thee. And the children of Israel stripped themselves of their ornaments by the Mount Horeb. Now, friends, before they could go into the promised land, God made them take off their ornaments. You say, well, now, what does that have to do with us? You know, that's something happened way back in the Old Testament. It has no application today to the people living under the new covenant here in the New Testament times. Well, friends, let's find out if it has anything to do with us. Please come to the New Testament now, 1 Corinthians 10, and the first few verses. And here we read something very interesting about the Israelites as they came up out of Egypt, referring back to that same time I read just now in the book of Exodus. It talks here about how they went through the Red Sea, and they came in verse 7. It says, in verse 6 rather, Now these things were our examples. Talking about the Israelites as they began their journey to the promised land. Now these things were our examples, to the intent we should not lust after evil things as they lusted. Neither be ye idolaters, as were some of them. Neither let us commit fornication, as some of them committed. Neither let us tempt Christ, as some of them also tempted. Neither murmur ye, as some of them murmured. Verse 11, Now all these things happened unto them for examples, and they're written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the world are come. Now listen, everything that happened to that ancient nation of Israel happened as an example for us, friends. There is a direct parallel between ancient Israel and modern Israel. We're modern Israel, you see. And their coming out of the bondage of Egypt represents our coming out of the bondage of sin. Their crossing the Red Sea represents baptism for us, because it says right here, and they were all baptized unto Moses and the cloud and the sea. So that represents baptism for us. Their going through the wilderness represents our going through this old dark world of sin. And their coming into Canaan represents our coming into the heavenly Canaan. See? Beautiful parallel. And it says it all happened for an example for us. And so when we come back here and read that before they could go into the land of Canaan, they had to lay aside their ornaments, my friends, there is a parallel. I really believe that it's an indication of what pleases the Lord. Now you come on down to 2 Kings 9 and verse 30. And we find the first recorded instance of the use of colorful cosmetics. Now this is the first either inside or outside the Bible. We don't have any record even from secular history of any earlier use of colorful cosmetics in this text right here in 2 Kings 9:30. And when Jehu was come to Jezreel, Jezebel heard of it, and she painted her face and tarred her head and looked out at a window. That's the first record we have of a woman painting her face. And it was Jezebel doing it. You know who Jezebel was? Not a very savory character, was she? She destroyed hundreds of God's prophets and was a very, very wicked woman, of course. And I know my dear old Baptist father used to say she's painted up like Jezebel. Have you heard that expression? This is where it came from, of course, because she apparently originated the practice, as far as we know, because it's the earliest known instance of it. Well, we can come on over into the many writings of the prophets. We come, for example, to Isaiah chapter 3, and notice a very interesting record here about the daughters of Zion. Verse 16 says, Moreover the Lord saith, Because the daughters of Zion are haughty, and walk with stretched forth necks and wanton eyes, walking and mincing as they go, and making a tinkling with their feet. Verse 18, And that day the Lord will take away the bravery of their tinkling ornaments about their feet, and their cauls and their round tires like the moon, the chains and the bracelets and the mufflers, the bonnets and the ornaments of the legs and the headbands, and the tablets and the earrings, the rings and nose jewels. Now some of these we don't even recognize. They're oriental objects of adornment. Over in India, for example, where I lived for 5 years, you see all of these things. They have the nose jewels, of course, that are mentioned here, and the bangles and everything else covering their bodies. And after describing the fact that the daughters of Zion were wearing these things, come on down a few verses now and see what God thought about it and what He said about it. In chapter 4, verses 2 to 4. In that day shall the branch of the Lord be beautiful and glorious, and the fruit of the earth shall be excellent and comely for them that are escaped of Israel. And it shall come to pass that he that is left in Zion, and he that remaineth in Jerusalem, shall be called holy, even every one that's written among the living in Jerusalem, when the Lord shall have washed away the filth of the daughters of Zion, and shall have purged the blood of Jerusalem from the midst thereof by the spirit of judgment and by the spirit of burning. God says, I'm going to wash away the filth of the daughters of Zion, after describing it, of course. And then He said the ones that are left are going to be holy and beautiful and glorious and comely, which means good looking. You know, the women put these things on to make themselves good looking. But God apparently doesn't see things the way we do, friends. And He said, I'm going to wash away the filth of these daughters of Zion. And then He says those that are left are going to be comely and beautiful and glorious and holy. So we get a pretty good idea here, again, of the way God looked upon these things. Now, notice He says here, rings. He says rings. Now, I've had people say to me, I've had a high school senior say to me, well, you know, God wasn't talking about my class ring, because that's not really an ornament. That's a symbol of my being a senior. So He wasn't talking about that. He was talking about other kinds of rings. And then I've had Masons say the same thing. You know, they have a Masonic ring, and they say, well, you know, my ring signifies the fact I belong to the lodge. And so God wasn't talking about this ring. He was talking about other rings. And then, of course, there's the birthstone ring and the friendship ring and the engagement ring and the wedding ring, and you could go right on down the list. And it would be easy, I think, for any of us to say, well, you know, God wasn't talking about the one I got on. He was talking about everybody else's. Now, friends, what are we trying to find out here as we read these verses? We're trying to find out how to please the Lord. Is that right? Not how to get around pleasing Him. See, we're trying to find out how to please Him. Now, I can quibble over the kind of of ornaments I'm wearing, the kind of rings. And I can say, well, God didn't mean this. But friends, I don't want to run any risk of displeasing God. Do you? I'm trying to find out how to please Him. I'm not trying to find out how much I can get by with and still make it to heaven. Now, God is not saying here, you take that off or else. No, He's not. All He's doing is giving us some hints and some indications of what He likes and what pleases Him. And what I'm saying is, friends, if we love Jesus with all our heart, we'll want to do the thing that pleases Him, and we'll not want to run any risk of displeasing Him. That's what I believe. Now, sometimes people say, well, Brother Joe, what about the wedding ring? You know, that one really is a sort of a sacred thing. Well, do you find anything in the Bible, my friends, about any sign or symbol of being married? Do you find anything in the Bible about that? Do you know what a marriage is made up of? Promises that two people make to each other. Isn't that right? Promises. Do you know where that wedding ring came from? Let me read you something interesting. I've got here in my hand a page out of the book by Cardinal John Newman, one of the princes of the cardinals of the Catholic Church. He wrote a book entitled An Essay on the Development of Christian Doctrine. And in this book, he gave some very interesting statements about how paganism came in from sun worship into the Catholic Church. Here's the statement he makes in this book. He said, Constantine, in order to recommend the new religion to the heathen, transferred into it the outward ornaments to which they had been accustomed in their own. Now, here's a cardinal of the church saying that when Constantine came into the Catholic Church, he brought a lot of pagan things with him. He says, it is not necessary to go into a subject which the diligence of Protestant writers has made familiar to most of us. The use of temples, and these dedicated to particular saints, incense, candles, holy water, asylums, processions, the ring in marriage, turning to the east, images at a later date, are all of pagan origin and sanctified by their adoption into the church. Now, friends, that ring originally represented the disk of the sun. It was worn by the pagan sun worshippers to honor their sun god and to be with them constantly to remind them of the disk of the sun. And when Constantine brought all these pagan objects into the church, he brought that ring with him, and the nuns of the church began to wear it to represent being married to Christ or married to the church. And from there it passed into Protestantism as a sign of marriage. But it's not in the Bible at all. I know people who think that they don't have that little piece of metal on their finger, they're not married. And they pull it off at times and say they're not married. Well, now, friends, you're married because you make vows to God and to each other. That's what marriage is. And that little ring doesn't mean a thing. I don't have to prove that I'm faithful to my wife to the public. I don't have to prove to anybody. I keep my promises. I'm faithful because of the promises I made. But I just mentioned this to give you a little background and to show you that we don't have to quibble over the kind, whether it's a class ring, a Masonic ring, or any other ring. I say let's give God the benefit of the doubt. Why run a risk of displeasing Him? And if He doesn't like rings, let's say, well, that's it. We won't bother with any of them. Come on down to the next book of the Bible, which is Jeremiah, chapter 4, verse 30. And when thou art spoiled, what wilt thou do? Though thou clothest thyself with crimson, though thou deckest thee with ornaments of gold, though thou rentest thy face with painting, in vain shalt thou make thyself fair. Thy lovers will despise thee, they will seek thy life. Now, all through the Bible, God uses a woman to represent the church. Remember that? A woman to represent the church. He's married to the church. She's the bride. He's the bridegroom. And He uses this woman to symbolize the relationship with His faithful people. But friends, when His people became unfaithful and turned away from Him, how do you think the woman is represented, the bride of Christ? She's represented as going after her lovers and becoming unfaithful to Him, see? And in every case that I can read here in the prophets, my friends, when she turns away symbolically from her husband to go after her lovers, she puts on all of the adornments. In other words, it's used in the Bible as a symbol of apostasy and a symbol of unfaithfulness. Here he's talking about his bride, and he says, thy lovers will despise thee, though you clothe yourself with ornaments of gold and rent your face with painting. He says, they will despise thee, they'll seek thy life. Going on into the next book of the prophets, in Ezekiel chapter 23. He uses two women here to represent Judah and Israel in verse 36. He gives them names even. He said, the Lord said moreover unto me, Son of man, wilt thou judge Aholah and Aholibah? Yea, declare unto them their abominations, that they've committed adultery. And verse 40, and furthermore that ye have sent for men to come from far, unto whom a messenger was sent. And lo, they came, for whom thou didst wash thyself, paintest thy eyes, and deckest thyself with ornaments. He said, you've turned away from me, you've gone after your lovers, and you've put on all these things and have become unfaithful to me. You find that same thought repeated again in the little book of Hosea, chapter 2 and verse 13. And I will visit upon her the days of Balaam, wherein she burned incense to them, and she decked herself with her earrings and her jewels, and she went after her lovers and forgot me, saith the Lord. Same thing again, turning away from him, going off to commit spiritual adultery, and putting on all these things which are used in the Bible as a symbol of unfaithfulness. Coming over into the New Testament, we find similar statements. In 1 Peter 3, 1-3, likewise, ye wives, be in subjection to your own husbands, that if any obey not the word, they also may without the word be won by the conversation of the wives. And this word conversation, of course, is a word meaning the deportment, the conduct, not just the speech, but rather the whole way of life. While they behold your chaste conversation coupled with fear, whose adorning, let it not be that outward adorning of plaiting the hair and of wearing of gold. Now this word plaiting, by the way, is a Greek word meaning to weave ornaments into the hair. See, the word here is plaiting, and there's another use of it we'll read now in Timothy in just a moment. But it says, let it be the hidden man of the heart, and that which is not corruptible, even the ornament of a meek and quiet spirit. Then we come back to Timothy here. First Timothy 2, verse 9. It says, in like manner also that women adorn themselves in modest apparel, with shamefacedness and sobriety, not with broided hair or gold or pearls. And this word broided, that's the word I was thinking of. Plaited in Peter, and here it's broided, but it's the same original word, meaning the weaving of ornaments into. So it says, not with this, but which becometh women professing godliness with good works. So these are just a few texts now. And friends, to me, these give, and this is not all of them by any means. You'll find most of them, though, in the little book you'll receive. But I've just read enough to show you the hints that are given in the Bible. And I think they're a little more than hints, really. I think they're more than little hints and indications. Now, somebody may say, well, Brother Joe, you know, that's a little thing. You're talking about a small, little, inconsequential thing. Of course it is. Well, let me ask you something, Rich. How do you show your love the most? By the big things or the little things you do? Well, you ask any lady, you know. I'm sure my wife would appreciate a new washing machine or a new dryer for her birthday. But if I came in one day with a little bunch of hand-picked flowers that I'd gone out in the field and gathered for her, and come in and say, honey, I'm going to dry the dishes for you today, she would appreciate that a lot more than the washer or dryer. She really would. It would show my love for her a lot more, because she would know that I'd never go out and pick those flowers for any other reason except that I wanted to please her, show my love to her. It's in those little things, folks, that we do that really show our love. You may think this is a small matter. Maybe it is. But I believe it's in those small things that we really show our true love to God and our willingness to put Him above ourselves.